On the 10th of July 2009, a guild came along that no one had been paying attention to, despite them getting a world 10th on Algalon the Observer, and they went on to kill Yogg-Saron Zero Lights as the first team in Europe or North America. This guild then went on to crush everything in their path. They developed strategies that no one else could think of and cement themselves, even to this day, as potentially the greatest raiding guild World of Warcraft has ever seen. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the legacy of Paragon. So where does Paragon come from? And don't say Finland, we're going to get to that. As with all the major guilds, even to this day, 20 years on from World of Warcraft's launch, many of them, shockingly, were always near the top. We traced them all the way back to vanilla, to a Finnish-only guild called Grim's Sight, who started to stand above the rest of the players on the server. They were famous for claiming their server's Kazakh kills over and over again, despite the fierce server competition for those kills. But they thirsted for more, as many raiders do, and then the theory and work of mergers. Merger after merger after merger starts taking place until they eventually formed a guild called Beyond Redemption. Now, Beyond Redemption were awesome. They claimed the coveted World 5th on Kel'Thuzad all the way back. Then, more merges. And more merges. An ongoing process of trying to find the best of the best players was an ongoing thing, all the way up until Wrath of the Lich King. It was at this point there's two guilds, Knockout and Sauna. Both of them, little inconsistent on the roster, a myriad skill level, and so then, with the leadership of Satyr and Balther and others, they were joined together to form the ultimate team. Paragon has arrived. When it comes to this young upstart guild, Paragon, there is one unique feature that we all know about. They all came from one singular country. This is so unusual in today's internet age.
Oh, poor Preach. Look at you, scurrying like a rat. Yet you have no idea what awaits you. Little historian, pleading for laughter in the suffocating void. You and your world will be mine.
And you've got to imagine that gave them various advantages, being able to travel out and see their friends immediately after a boss kill. When I was speaking to some of the members of Paragon, they universally agreed that their all-Finnish approach was a massive key to their success. Imagine the simple things. I take it for granted that I am a native English speaker and that the English language is currently the most spoken language in the world. However, it's mostly a second language for many. There are barriers, shyness that is developed because maybe you're not quite understanding exactly what is being said. For Paragon though, it was the absolute opposite. People could be themselves. They could be free every single time. Everybody I spoke to in Paragon universally agreed that the fact that they could have annual cottage trip meetups, that they could see their friends regularly, it gave them a camaraderie and a successful road that literally no other guild in the world could utilize. What was interesting in the raid scene was the reaction to this big play, their world's second Yogg-Saron Zero Lights. As we talked about in our Insidia video, many of the top guilds never bothered with Yogg Zero. They considered it pointless, and in some ways they dismissed Paragon's achievement. Their world's second was, of course, it was impressive, but also, the big raider boys, they weren't pushing, they weren't trying, so don't get cocky, boys. So now, Trial of the Crusader is here, and you might think to yourself, based on what just happened, that Method, Insidia, Premonition, those guilds weren't fearful of Paragon, at least that's what they were saying, right? Paragon's kill of Yogg-Saron, it was a fluke. They got lucky, we weren't even trying, we were ignoring the boss. All those things are technically true, but I could tell you firsthand that that wasn't really what was happening internally. You see, at this very moment, I was under my trial for Method. I was making my run to be a world first raider. Now, Trial of Crusader, we had decided, rightfully so, to divide the guild into 4 10-man groups for Heroic, and this meant that we collect all the best loot we can before we go into the 25-man. and go for the big prize. So we're chilling, we're having fun, it's easy, it's not a big deal, we're clearing it really quickly. And after we killed the twin Valkyrs, the atmosphere changed. Suddenly, a halt was called on the raid. We were told to stop, don't do anything else. I'm still in trial, so I'm a little bit confused, and I'd never seen the guild behave this way because I joined essentially during a farm period. About a minute or so later, one of the officer team joins our group in the chat. It's then stressed to us how important it is that we succeed, that we do well. Because out of all the groups that had gone into TOC, we were the only ones that had reached the last boss without a death. And you might not know, but there was an achievement, a special achievement, the Tribute to Insanity 10-man that we could have achieved as long as we killed a new Barak without any deaths. And the reason? Really important that we take that kill away from Paragon and put Method in the world first notoriety position. This was really important that we were stressed to. So I was fired up, right? I am so excited. I'm going to get like a world first decent reward literally under my trial phase. This is sick. And the whole team was feeling it. It was like, yeah, dudes, we're going to go in. And then we spent like 10 minutes talking strategy. We're all like, oh yeah, okay, you go here, and then you go here. And we wiped in like the first 10 seconds, which sucked for sure. But like also we had no idea what the boss was going to do, and that in Heroic it was completely different to what we'd seen before. It wasn't good, but the point was, this outward feeling that Paragon was a nothing, that wasn't true. People knew who they were, and that they were coming. Trial of the Crusader was a pivotal moment though. It was the first time Paragon showed that they weren't a one-trick pony. They weren't going to be doomed to be rank 2, 3 or 4 forevermore, and that they had an ability that surpassed their competition. This would become Paragon's calling card. It was the ability to outthink their competition. Here's the world first kill, and you will notice a rather odd string of messages in yellow right above the mid-section of the screen. Paragon had discovered a way to bypass one of the most difficult parts of the encounter. For whatever reason, a paladin's AoE stun to undead didn't cause a diminishing return. If you're not sure what that means, when you stun something, it lasts its proper time, but if you stun it again, it lasts shorter and so on until it can't be stunned. They could just stun the ads over and over again until they died. It reduced a huge amount of potential damage and risk on the raid, and with this tech, and of course their astonishing gameplay, Paragon claimed an undisputed world first. The thing is, everybody loves an underdog. They were sick and tired of these regular names, these methods, insidias, the corporatization, the money involvement that was going on in raiding, and then suddenly these Finnish guys show up and just start crushing face. When they killed New Barak using this stun maneuver, a lot of other guilds, like we mentioned in our Insidia video, were waiting for the public to be outspoken about them cheating, about them exploiting. Nope. People liked them. They weren't going to be like that. People liked Paragon. That was just clever use of game mechanics. They would bash on Insidia and crap all over them for using flower power and all that stuff, but when it came to Paragon, those boys got a free pass. Paragon's forums are still up and they're live with thoughts on progress, raiding, internal operations. It's a really wonderful read if you want to have a bit of a nerd session. The routine of Paragon was, for that time, extremely hardcore. Remember, we're still predating full-time raiding, professional guilds, things like that, so Cruff explained a typical progress day for them. They would raid from 6 PM until 2 AM. After that, they had to go and do dailies, heroics, all for that Valor Point cap to get more items. They would sleep at 4 AM, then they would go to work at 9 AM, come straight home, and repeat until the boss was dead. It's Rakes in an article who goes on to explain how easy it could be to burn out on WoW and pushing this hard. But it was the camaraderie, the social elements of the guild offered that no one else could that made it all worthwhile for them. So, onwards they pushed. There's got to be a theme happening here for the next little while, and that is the raid scene is a really toxic place. There are more attempts to diminish Paragon's achievements than I've ever seen levied at any guild ever, and that includes the bickering between the hardcore fans of Liquid and Echo. There's a message here. Paragon weren't welcome. They weren't wanted. They weren't part of the established order. That's the vibe I get from talking to a lot of people across the raid scene, is these guys just came in and they didn't want them. Paragon is going to have to fight the good fight and be accused of cheating and exploiting constantly, and not just by people on the outside and observers. I'm talking about other guilds. Internally, though, this was something that Paragon fought really hard to not be a part of. It was actually a core value. They hated the stress and drama that existed in the raid scene and just worked hard to resolve any issues as much as possible. Not that they regularly did not have to defend themselves. But here's the thing, and I think you're going to like this. Paragon always brought the receipts. So the first of these, of course, was the Anubarak stuns. The second was less obvious. Accusations began to fly that Paragon, or their fans, were behind the lag on Method's server Taran Mill. It was claimed that Paragon was using a phishing macro in Dalaran on Taran Mill, which would cause the whole server to lag out and it would disrupt Method's ability to raid. Now, I have no doubt, yes, this was absolutely happening, and it was trolls being trolls, but Method had to, and did respond. They decided, fine, we're going to move our whole guild to Paragon's server, Lightning's Blade. If they were going to get trolled, and the server was going to get rolled, then so were Paragon. Paragon's crowning achievement would of course come in Icecrown Citadel, as many of you know. After the early rush of guilds into the first bosses, Paragon pulled ahead with a world first on Professor Putricide. And after that, they just stayed in control. Their world first on Arthas itself is one of the most watched raid videos in history, with Usotonta still being called out to this day. Of course, it wasn't without controversy. This is Paragon, and they need to be diminished in some way. After what happened with Anubarak, this time accusations were that they were clearly exploiting the Lich King because everyone else found the fight too hard. This time they were trolling and bypassing mechanics by applying and removing HP buffs. This would cancel out the dangerous infest mechanic. This rumor and accusation started to spread quickly, and once again, Paragon brought the receipts. Much to the annoyance of the obvious haters. They were just better. I don't mean just skill, but in fact, the reality was they once again outthought not only the other teams in the race, but the devs themselves. When the video was released, Paragon had come up with a strategy which then became the strategy. Instead of killing the floating spirits as was intended by the developers, they simply ignored them. They managed to control them with positioning, and they just got soaked by a paladin. It allowed them to keep nuking Arthas' face. The developers were shocked this could even work, but by clever positioning, clever strategy, they once again left their calling card on Arthas' corpse. They were just better. As far as I know, Paragon were legit the only guild that went on to kill the Lich King Heroic without using the Hellscream buff at all. And it wouldn't end there. Cataclysm's first raid was Paragon outthinking everyone, while of course, also once again, being called cheaters. The most famous of these is Nefarian Heroic and the 11 Fuzzy Boys. Hilariously, it was the guild Stars of Yogg-Saron World First fame that called out Paragon on MMO Champion of all places. They then claimed that Paragon was an embarrassing guild, only capable of winning via exploits, and the fact they hadn't killed Nefarian since the fight was quote-unquote fixed proved that they must have cheated and exploited their world first kill. I think we should clear this up once and for all. Why, when you watch this video, are there 11 druids? Well, it was simple. Nefarian gave some players a damage amplification buff that only applied to the next spell that character cast. One-time use, that's it. Feral Druid's Rip, their damage over time bleed, was the most damaging single target spell in the game. So amping it up to absurd degrees made it do a ton of damage, but that isn't the whole story. In order to make this whole thing work, every druid who was just sat there had to get 5 combo points, save all their trinkets, save their cooldowns, and just wait to see if the game chose them for the damage buff. Outside of that, they had to almost AFK, basically do no damage in case they got the buff and then couldn't cast Rip if they'd spent their points. It was a massive trade-off they weren't even sure was worth it. Now, mathematically, it should have been better. And the druids can also use their AoE heals, etc. for the big damage that was going out in the fight, so it had some usage. But that's it. No exploit, no druid-specific thing, just hope the game boosts up the druids who are sat waiting, and hope it does a lot of damage, which it did. Pretty simple stuff. It should also be pointed out the irony. Stars, if you don't know, accusing Paragon of class-stacking exploits. They, themselves, had blown the world away by stacking Warlocks in their world first of Yogg-Saron for the exact same reason. Those classes just played better in the final phase. And yes, I know it looks daft today, but 5 of one class in a raid at that time was crazy. It was the same as the things we had to do with Shamans in the Sunwell. Alakir was the next big brain play that met with frustration from the other guilds. You can almost feel the fists clenching. It was considered at the raid scene at the time as an unkillable boss. It was broken, it couldn't be done. And then, wouldn't you goddamn know it, Paragon killed it. How? How? People cried. How is this happening? Well, we soon found out. They just hid their players far away from the fight for all of Phase 1 to get around the impossible part, and then they jumped over and executed the rest of the fight. Once again, as Alakir dwindled away into the winds, all that was left was that classic Paragon calling card on another corpse. Strategy-wise, gameplay-wise, Paragon is just leaps and bounds above everybody at this point. It's not even close. While everyone else is like working really hard and thinking about how to get over this really steep wall that Blizzard's put in front of them, Paragon just found a way of just walking around it more times than not. And now the Firelands is coming. Daddy's coming. Big Fireboy himself. Method, though? They're not ready to go to that world's second place they've been stuck in since the Burning Crusade. Not by a long shot, and they're bringing the noise. When it came to this raid, I think it was put best by Jazrune, Paragon's pony-loving priest. No one is prepared for the locomotive magnificence of the Firelord's lower limbs. It was Method that claimed the first big wall, Balorok. 10 hours later, Paragon did that, and then the next boss, Major Domo, an hour before Method killed it. Both guilds are basically neck and neck on Big Boy Raggy. And when all was said and done, widely considered to be one of the greatest raid bosses ever made, fell a full week earlier to Paragon. At this point, it's hard to deny that Paragon were more than worthy of being on the pantheon of WoW raiding guilds. But then irony strikes. All this talk of exploits and Paragon dodging them like Neo was about to strike disaster. The Dragon Soul LFR exploit has been widely covered by us on the channel, and Paragon was included. So many of their players were a week behind on gear. They had no access to the mega gems that eventual World First Raiders Kin Raiders had, and so their winning streak was ended. Now, you would think that this might be chalked up to experience. They weren't the only ones that got hit by this, so lesson learned and go on your merry way. There's always next time, right? But that wasn't the case for Paragon. It hit them hard internally. Some players had vacations planned, and Paragon just went dark. No communication, no nothing for a really, really long time. It wouldn't be until June 2012 that an article came up on the site to address their seemingly disappearance. And it was played down somewhat. Things were fine internally. We were all in Finland and people were enjoying the summer. Some players had graduated, but everything was good. And remember, Mr. Pandaria is on its way, and Paragon will be back in fine form. That's not entirely true. I've spoken to several members of Paragon in creating this video, and they're all wonderful, wonderful people. Some of them didn't reply, which is fine, but one thing that was for sure is how shy they are. It was actually surprising, considering their world first platform they were on, but I'm not talking about don't want to talk or anything like that, but literally shy. Some of them even sent me paste bins of thoughts because they wanted time to get it together and make it work, and it was wonderful to see, but one thing bled through this that's so different. We look at the race to world first now. It's got corporate elements, there's a huge amount of money involved, it's a spectacle, it's a show, and it has brought me and you and the players wonderful things. But Paragon, from everything I could tell, from everything everybody said to me even off the cuff of their own thing. They played for the love of the game and that's it. Money wasn't a thing. Corporate investment and futures and careers wasn't a thing. They played because they were a bunch of friends who liked gaming and wanted to game at the highest level, but they just wanted to game. That's not to say they didn't have sponsors. They had ASUS, they partnered with Dream, but this was literally to just give them cool opportunities to do with their friends. They got to travel to China, they got to go to BlizzCon, they got to do all this stuff, but ultimately it wasn't about money. When I brought up the money situation to them, they were like, we just didn't talk about that stuff. We just wanted to play. And in this day and age where there are people getting into the race to world first who are money focused, it's amazing to see that these were the dudes that were just in it because they wanted to play. They lost players. There was bickering internally. The conversation about maybe it's time to recruit outside of Finland came up, but it was quickly dismissed at this time. The potential of the new players they did get wasn't world first standard. And so with the we just want to play the game in mind, the announcement was made that Paragon was going 10-man, preferring to keep the internal foundation and core of the guild the same and just do what they love. On a personal note, this was really sad for me. I loved Paragon. I was a member of the opposing team, but still, Paragon were amazing. They were so good, and this basically was the end. 10-man's great. It's wonderful. Lots of fun. I enjoy it, but it's not the same. It's not the big show. It's not the big dance. And might as well, Paragon should have stopped then, in my eyes. It was awful. Their crowning achievement during this, of course, was the world first 10-man Garrosh heroic kill, accompanied, of course, by a Sparkle Pony, where they solo healed it and amazed everybody, and proved once again that they are the best in the world at what they do. It just wasn't in the big arena where we wanted to see them. But with Warlords of Draenor around the corner, we all desperately wanted them to return after seeing that kill. And return they did. They got really lucky. There was actually another Finnish-only 10-man raid guild called Depraved that grabbed the world's second Garrosh. Now, it's not a mystery as to what comes next. They glued them together, raised the toast, and announced that Paragon was back. They were coming back for the new 20-man raid roster size of Warlords of Draenor, and they were coming back for the title. It's so funny they played that classic calling card again. While Method was bashing into the Butcher, Mythic, and Highmore, the toughest boss of all time, blah blah blah, Paragon realized they could just not do it and just go and kill the last boss and claim the world first instead, which is exactly what they did. Paragon, in their first raid back, were right back on top. And for us, spectators, the world was at peace once again. It was a party everywhere. For a brief time. The Blackrock Foundry. It was close, man. It was really, really close. One of the tougher bosses and my personal favourite, the Blast Furnace for Method and Paragon, were literally within 7 hours of each other. After that, though, Paragon just couldn't keep up. Method were in their stride, and they're not about to go back to world second status. It ain't happening. When talking to Frago about this, who was a member at the time, as Blackhand fell for Method, in his mind, this was the first fully, undisputed, no qualms, no ifs, ands, or buts, race loss Paragon had suffered. Every other time there was something that could be pointed to, some reason, some weirdness, but not this time. They just didn't have that all-round package. New recruits were a mixed bag. But more importantly, and a common theme that we see, the vibe had changed. We're quite a few videos into this history and legacy of WoW right now, and I wanted to talk to you guys because there's a common theme coming out. Whether it be the $1 million guilds or some normal mode guild, one thing you're seeing throughout all these is it's not the money, it's not the skill or anything like that. What changes and what ultimately kills these guilds is the vibe changes, the environment shifts, and when that changes, it crumbles. If you can keep it though, you can keep it going forever. It's the same as the mythic raiders who pushed for world first suddenly now are old men raiding heroic together despite it's not being a challenge or anything like that. Look, when the vibe of your guild changes and you can't prevent it, if it could topple the greats, which we've seen, it could topple you as well. And that's okay, because that's life and that's growing up. It's at this point the Finnish-only foundation of this wonderful guild was absolutely a problem. They knew it. We knew it. They talked far more seriously this time about opening the doors to the rest of the world. They debated it a lot, but ultimately, even the mechanics of transferring everything internally from Finnish back to English, spreadsheets and all this kind of stuff, even though nearly everybody within the guild could speak English, was just going to be an enormous hassle. It would also just take away even more from the vibe that they wanted and had established. In HFC, Paragon did get some world firsts. Their display of absolute poetry and skill on Archimonde Mythic with the Wrought Chaos is still a sight that I behold. I watch it all the time, but it also did highlight a weakness of the modern era of raiding. Paragon fell on what they knew. We outthink and we outplay the mechanics better than anyone else, and that is absolutely true. But the times had changed. The tech was better. And Method in that way was just way ahead. Instead of coming up with some beautiful, gorgeous strategy to outplay the mechanic, they just used an add-on and ignored it. And instead of that fancy gameplay, they just smashed face into the boss all along the way. With this back-to-back loss, on the 25th of February, Paragon decided to disband. In the end, after speaking to them and going over everything, their biggest strength, their uniqueness, their Finnish-only approach, kind of ended up being their biggest weakness as well when it came to keeping everything going. Paragon, to me, are the last of the old guard, the last of the old ways, the last of the major world-first competition, the actual game changers who played for the love of the game only, and they stuck to their guns. They absolutely maintained everything that made the start of their guild, that massive road to success, the same. It's unfortunate it wasn't sustainable. A lot of the players still play today. You can see them in a lot of the top guilds, and you'll see them members in Echo even. Paragon to me are a shining example that absolutely belong on the Mount Rushmore of raiders. They're phenomenal. Watching them is a joy, and I still regularly rewatch their videos whenever I get chance. But they're not the last ones who belong on that Mount Rushmore. I'll be saving that for next time. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and be sure to check out our website. Check out our links down below for lots of references. And if you bump into any members of Paragon, give them a hell yeah, because they were awesome.
You and all you know shall be mine.